So this is a very, very important parak tonight. Really gets into understanding what our lives are sort of about, and why we find ourselves exactly where every person finds his or herself. So let's get right into it. Until now, we covered the whole relationship between in this specific section, the relationship between the neshama and the guf, the effect that they have on each other, right? That the neshama is here in order to be mizakech the guf. However, that can't happen in actuality. It can only happen in potential. It can't happen in reality until after they separate at death and the guf loses the ra, and then the neshama comes back down. Okay, but now he's talking about, if you'll remember what he said over there, is that there's a big difference between the unification or the joining of the guf and the neshama when a person is born, as opposed to when a person will be reborn by Tchias Amesim. And he explained to us that before. But now he's discussing, when a person comes into this world, right? When a person comes into Olam Hazeh, and that guf and that neshama are put together, and a person is created. So that this parak is going to discuss sort of, what are the factors that go into that. So let's see what he says. But matzavo shel ha'adam ba'olam hazeh hadrachim shelafonav b'derech prat. Okay, so again, this is chelik aleph, parak dalid, seif aleph. We're starting from the beginning right now. Okay, but the status of a person in this world. But matzavo shel ha'adam ba'olam hazeh yibachanu shnei inyanim. Okay, so there are two factors when we are discussing a person, and these two factors are going to be the determining factors for, basically the structure of this entire person's life. And every single person has a unique set of these two factors. And those are, one, tchunas atzmo, the person, shel ha'adam b'chalakav v'harkav asam, the person himself and his makeup, right? How he is structured, how he is put together, what his constituent parts are, and how they are murkav, how are they formed and how are they put together. So that's one, right? One aspect that sets the stage for my life is my DNA, right? All the parts of me that make me me, my tchunot, and also my spiritual, right? Like I said before, every person's yachas, every person's relative relationship between their neshama and their guf is different. So that's also a part of this. That's the tchunas atzmo. V'hamakom asher hu musam bo, and the place where the person is, right? The outside, the external environment, right? The time is a big factor in this, right? The fact that we are all living right now in 2020 and not in 1920, thank God, or 1820, or any other time. So that's also a part of the makom that we are in, and everything that has to do with that. So this is like a very a fundamental idea. So I was just looking at one of the notes. A very, very fundamental idea. That these are the two facets of a person, the two aspects that make up a person, is going to explain now each one of these, in its own separate place. Okay, most of it's going to deal with it. Okay, base tchunas ha'adam. So now this is talking about the person himself in this world. But bechinas ha'adam atzmo. And we're talking about, again, the tchunas atzmo, the parts of the person himself. So we said already that every person is a combination, a murkav, a hybrid of two opposites. Dahainu anashama v'haguf, right? The physical and the spiritual. V'ulam hine anachnu roim be'enenu she'achamrios rishoni yibo. Right. However, we all know, right, that the physicality of a person takes hold first, right? It has dibs, it's first dibs. V'toldos of chazakos bo ma'od, and the effects of the physical pull are very, very powerful. Right? When a person is born immediately, kimat kulo chamri ve'ein haseichel poel bo ela ma'at. Right? A person, when they're first born, they are basically totally physical beings. Right? They're like little, I don't want to say like an animal, but there's no seichel. Kimat, there's no seichel. Right? The only seichel that what we would call, that a baby has, that knows how to smile back and, certain things, but, enough to keep its body functioning on the inside, right? But there's no spirituality, right? Like we said, seichel, like the haskala, a baby doesn't have that at all. And as a person develops, as a person grows, so their seichel, again, seichel meaning their development in spirituality, their connection to Hashem, their ruchnius, right, that continues to grow. But al kol panim lo yosur achamrios mimshal bo umehatososo elinanav. However, no matter what happens, no matter what degree a person's seichel is developed, the physical body never stops. It never stops having its pull on a person, and it never stops swaying a person to take care of its needs, meaning the physical body. Right? However, if a person will learn chachma and develop their seichel, again, these are catchphrases in terms of spiritual development, and strengthen himself in it, he will have the ability to conquer, to subdue his teva. V'lo yishlach resen ta'avosav miyado. It's such a beautiful lashon, and he won't. A resen is a muzzle, right? What you put on an animal to prevent it from eating. When an animal is working, so you don't want it to eat, so they put a muzzle on it. So a person is supposed to hold the resen of their taivos in their hands, right? That means that I am in control of my taivos, right? Yes, of course I want to eat. Of course I want to do all sorts of things, right? But just like a muzzle, I think that's what it's called, right? I'm not talking about a muzzle that like stops the dog from barking, but a muzzle that stops an animal from eating. So a person is supposed to, it's a metaphor for control, right? That's just what it is. So a person is supposed to keep their taivos under control. We can't get rid of our taivos. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as not wanting to eat. There's no such thing as not being connected to our body. If a person tells you that they're like that, they're not healthy. They're unbalanced. That's 100%, and that's across the board. I know, I just, as a side point, I remember when I was in yeshiva, a few times along the way, there were like certain people who felt that they were so spiritual that they would barely eat and barely do those things and whatever. It's unhealthy and unbalanced. There's no such thing, in this world. A person will always have those taivos, will always have that physicality, will always, but we have to keep a resa, and we have to keep a muzzle on it. V'lo yishlach resen ta'avosav miyado. Hold on, never let go of that. Don't let go. Right. So I'm just backing out from that metaphor. So he's saying again, if a person will develop our seichel, if we'll develop our spirituality, if we'll develop our connection to Hashem, v'yisametz lichvosh estivo, and I'm going to make an effort, I'm going to make a real push to suppress my nature, and I'm not going to let my taivas take control. I'm going to keep myself in check, and push myself, right? He says here twice in this thing, a lashon of struggling. Yisametz and yisatzim. Interesting. It's like the same sounds with aleph and an ayin, different. Okay. Anyway, so right, a person, it's a struggle, right? Because it starts with the physicality, right? It starts with the body, and like you said, miyad acher ligaso, when a person is just born, and it's like that for the whole first years of our lives until we start to develop and start to think and connect to Hashem, etc. Right? But our physical guf and its needs are always front and center. V'ulam tochios ha'inyonim ha'ela she'anu roim, hinei hu shebemetzius ha'chomer ba'atzmuso nimtza ha'achirus v'achoshech b'teva, v'hu metzius rachok me'od v'hafchi l'ma shehu ha'inyan be'emes l'krivim and l'kelius baruch ha'mestabim b'kedushaso. So he's saying like this, let's understand what's happening over here. Understand, what's going on the inside, right? What we see on the outside is a person who is, as a child, as a youngster, wild and not developed, and then they begin to develop their understanding and control themselves. He's saying, what's going on over here? The physicality, including the physicality of a person, right? That's part of the choshech. That's part of the chomer. That's part of the metzius of this world, which, just like our physical body, again, it's not ra. We're not calling it ra, but it's the opposite of spiritual, right? My neshama is spiritual. My body is the opposite of that in its physicality. So too with the world, right? The metzius of the chomer is rachok ma'od v'hafchi l'ma shehu ha'inyan be'emes l'krivim l'kelius baruch ha'mestabim b'kedushaso, right? It's the opposite of what we're here to be connecting ourselves to. And the neshama itself, even though, of course, we know the neshama is, super bright and super powerful, however, when the neshama is put down into this world, into the body, again, this is like exactly that song from Journeys, the Neshama song, right? That the Neshama is forced into a situation that is completely antithetical to it, right? The exact opposite of it. And the Neshama is suppressed over here. It's imprisoned, right, against its will. And there's no way for it to get itself out of this situation, this mess. Again, unless a person will do, like we said at the very beginning, will make a tremendous effort in order to allow their spirituality to overcome their physical. One second. Okay. And since Hashem said that this duo, this combination, this hybrid, will never separate, meaning, and he says over here, right? Don't say, it's so funny, right? We're used to talking about it in the opposite way, because we're talking about it like in a different musar. We always say, like, yeah, olam haza, the physical is fleeting, it's going to pass, and forever and ever and ever we're going to be in the spiritual, and that's what we have to focus on. And and of course that's true. He's talking here though in a very technical way, and he's saying that really though, when we're talking about the connect, everything we said is true about the physical versus olam haza versus olam haba. However, when we're talking about the aspect of the physical world of the connection between the neshama and the guf, so that, like he said earlier, that is a connection that is going to be forever. There's going to only be a temporary disconnect, right? The time of death is not the ultimate stage. That's a temporary time where there's going to be a disconnect between the neshama and the guf. Right? However, after that interim period, again, where the body breaks down and the neshama basks in the light of Hashem and gets all of the power that it deserves from all the mitzvahs that it did, right? However, they're going to get joined back together. That new rejoining is going to be forever, right? So it comes out that death is very, well, I guess you can't say statistically insignificant, because anything against infinity is right. But the idea that death is a very temporary stage, but really the guf and the neshama lo tiparid me'olam, they're going to be together forever. That's the setup. right? Again, and remember that Adam Arishon didn't have to die originally. He wasn't set up originally to die. So it could have been the Guf and the Neshama stayed together for Olam Hazeh, and then he would have proceeded into Olam Haba, having been Mizakech his Guf completely, right? However, only after the Chet of Adam Arishon, that's when Hashem gave us the Yovel Afar Tashuv, a person has to die. So that's why we have that temporary separation. Okay. But since the neshama and the guf are going to be together forever, right? So it's the neshama's got to do its job. It's got to do its thing and work away, chip away, weaken the darkness of the guf, until the guf can again ultimately end being completely free of any darkness. Again, Adam Rishon could have done this without death, but now we need death. Right? So it's like this beautiful story arc, right? That the neshama is brought down here and it suffers and it's difficult. And however, we make the big omets and we make the big fight and the struggle, and we allow our neshama to be mezakeh harguf. So when they're reunited finally by round two, so then they're both glorious and happy in the exact opposite situation that they were from before, because instead of the guf overshadowing the neshama is now going to overshadow the guf. Okay. However, ba'ulam ha'adam ba'olam hazeh hu b'matzav echad she'achomer chazak bo u'chamo shekasavnu b'yos hachomer acher v'chashuch nimtza ha'adam b'choshech gadol v'rachat ma'od mima sheroi lo sheyeh lios mizdabek bo yisbarach. However, right, that's the general arc of the story. However, when we zoom in on a person over here in this world, what do we see? We see a very, very simple sort of situation. Matzav echad. We don't see all of this. We just see this. His matzav in the world of Olam Hazeh, which is completely dark, completely thick, completely physical, and we don't see any. It's very, very far from what we would call a spiritual existence of experiencing Hashem. So, however, this is where a person has to place their focus, their effort, exactly to do this job, to elevate my seichel, elevate my spirituality, to connect to Hashem over my chomrius, over my physicality, right? And to better my situation, right? It's my choice. I have the opportunity to improve my lot. To reach my full potential. I have the ability to connect to my neshama, allow my neshama to work away at my guf, my guf, and to reach whatever ultimate stage of shleimus, of lack of chamrius that I'm capable of attaining. Okay. So far, so good. Okay, so all of that is talking about the Adam, right? Atzmo. If we go back to Sif Aleph, he said we have to address two things if we want to understand a person's matzav in this world. So part number one is each person. So each person is this neshama and this guf and this ongoing struggle and this, again, relative strength between the two, and each person in their areas of struggle, and each person in their areas where they excel, etc. That's all part of the Adam Atzmo. Okay, now we're going to talk about the everything else around us that has to happen. Right? Not only are we a physical person, and that physicality, affects our neshama or darkens our neshama, but we're put into a completely physical arena. V'chol hanimtzayim shebo chomriyim. Right? Everything in this arena is all physical. V'ha'esek shel adam bo ubimilo'o efshar sheyeh ela esek chomri v'gufani. right? And everything a person does, again, no matter the biggest gadol in the world, still has to just do human things, has to eat food, has to chew, has to swallow, has to, right? Just these are things that every human has to do. Since we live here in a physical world, right? So we are forced, right? There's no question. Every person is forced to interact constantly with all of the physical surroundings, with the whole thing that makes up his world. Right? And the putting together of the person is what pushes this work. I'm sorry, I misunderstood what he was saying. I'm sorry. It's the fact that we have this physical component to us, the fact that we're put together by the neshama. It's not just the neshama, but we have the guf with all of the physical needs of the guf, right? Right? A person needs everything, the physical needs that a person has. Vikinyan, right? And it's just very fascinating. I don't know, for some reason, I found this very interesting that, this is one of the only places that like I see where the Ramchal, and he's going to get into this even more later, explicitly, where it talks about like that, people have to work, I don't mean work like, like Olam Haza is all about avoda, but people have to make money, right? That's what he's talking about right now. Right, this couple, he's going to get back to this later, but it's not like I don't know. You kind of had like this idea, or I was, like the whole system of working and money and all of that sort of like, really b'diavad, and if a person could just be like super spiritual and and be supported, and Hashem would take care of them, and that's really the way things are supposed to be. It's, I think, like a very immature type of a perspective. And you see over here, he's saying this is the way the world. It sounds strange, right? It sounds strange that I guess it's part of Hashem's plan that the New York Stock Exchange should be running, and that people should have 401ks, and it's part of Hashem's plan, that minimum wage, is at a certain, but he's explaining right here that, in a very practical way, not in some, I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, like in terms of, I don't know, like this childish sort of notion of, anyway, see, he's saying, a person has to eat and drink, and he can't eat and drink, a person has to have money, has to have property, has to have stuff. You can't eat and drink if you don't have anything, right? So you have to have money in order to have food, in order to have, So you find that now from both sides, one from, again, mitzad atzmo, from the person's own guf, that affects his neshama, bein mitzad olamo, and all the other aspects that are outside of me, ubein mitzad isko, right? And everything that I have to do, right? Again, everything I have to do here is physical. There's nothing spiritual that I can do, right? That's the godless of a Jew, is that we can do physical things, and it creates spiritual realities. It affects the spiritual world, but we can't do anything spiritual, right? We can only do physical things, and that's it. So we are all constantly, totally drowned and overwhelmed by physicality, right? So much so that the vast majority of people, I don't want to say that, there's many people who are spiritual in different ways, let's say, but they agree to this tenet, right? This is one of these things that I said, I've taught this at the beginning of the year, that the difference between an atheist and any type of theist, even a pagan, right, is at least an understanding of this idea, right? That what we see here is not all that there is, and that there's something to see through over here, right? Lahavdil, Christianity, Islam, all the Eastern religions, they all believe that, right, that there's something behind what we see over here. It's only an atheist, right, that believes that what you see is what you get, and that there's nothing else. So that's like the epitome of this, that the epitome of being tavua b'chomer u'mushuka b'chashto, right? That's a person who is drowned completely, totally overwhelmed by the physicality that they can't even conceptualize that there's something more behind it, or so they say. The amal gadol v'hishtadlus chazak yitzarich lo, right? And this is something you and I know, right? It takes tremendous work. It's hard work. And again, the amal hishtadlus, he keeps using these words like Musar type words, because it's not a Musar Sefer Derech Hashem, but once you understand these ideas, you realize that the whole world is a Musar project. If you want to put it that way, the whole world is setting me up, for challenges, and that's why he keeps on, referring to this idea that there's no way to get through this world without struggling, which also is something that a person has a childish notion that like all sorts of struggles are stuff that gets in the way, and if only I would be so good, it would be like Kriyat Shema, where everything is good and shining, and so it's not like that. Again, that could have been Adam Rishon for the Chet or Bias Rishon and things like that, but now we are drowning in physicality, and in order to live in this world, we have to engage with the physical. However, we have to work to overcome it. In order to get ourselves to a more pure state, and remain, even though I'm still stuck doing these things, right? Even though I'm still stuck eating, drinking coffee, and having to deal with the physical world. However, again, I have the ability to elevate myself above that, to allow, again, not above it that I don't need to do it, but above it that I am not. I'm not living for that. I'm not living for my physical. I'm living for my spiritual, while I have to engage in the physical with what I need to do. Okay. More. Now moving further. Now is going to be the ways in which. Okay, we'll see. Oh, I have to plug in my computer. 1 second. That means my computer is about to die. 1 second. Pause. Sorry. ואולם מעומק עצס חכמסו יסברך היה לסדר הדברים באופן שאף ביוס האדם שקוע בחומר בהכרח, כמו שכסבנו, יוכל מתוך החומר עצמו והעסק הגופני השיג את השלימוס והישאלוס על זך על המעלה. Oh, so now he's saying what I'll tell you what he's saying. So now he's explaining the idea that it's not like I said before. It's not like that the world is supposed to be this, shining spiritual place, and all of this physicality is just getting in the way, and if only I could only live spiritually. No, what we understand that Hashem set it up in such a way that being tavua, being shakua in this chomer, but through that and through the esek hagufani, we can be masig, the shleimus that we're talking about, right? Now, how can that be if it's all physical and we're just dealing with the physical and we can't do anything spiritual? Because he gave us the Torah. Because the Torah is the vehicle, the way in which the interface, in which the physical can be utilized for the spiritual, right? Without the Torah, there would be no such option, right? We would just be presented with the physical world, and the physical properties of the physical world would be all that we have, but we would have no way, right, of being mezakech our guf. We would have no way of elevating the spiritual aspect of the world, because we'd have no idea what to do. What do I do to make the koach of my neshama greater and allow it to be mezakech my guf? How do I make that happen? Oh, so lefichach hir b'lehem Torah mitzvos. So Hashem gave us a way in which we could take every single thing in the physical world, every single thing. There's not a single thing that exists in the physical world that is not subject to Torah and mitzvos. So he gave us the playing field, the olam hazeh, the physicality, the choshech, the chamrius. He gave us the challenge, the goal, which is the neshama in the guf, and are we going to allow our neshama to be mezakech our guf or not? Right? And now he gives us this playing field of all of the physical activity that we have to do, and says you can either do this your way, right? Which is, just living life like a non-Jew, just, going through life and physical, or you could do this the Torah way, which is going to allow you to live your life and, arguably a better life or a wonderful life, and at the same time be mezakech your guf. At the same time, while you're just eating that apple, while you're just, playing that sports game, while you're just driving to work, you are doing an act of being mezakech your guf, because you're not just eating an apple or driving to work, you're doing avodas Hashem. And when you're doing avodas Hashem, that's being magdil l'neshama. Okay, that's this whole concept of what he's talking about here. Yuchol mitoch hachomer atzmo va'esek hagufani hasig es hashleimus v'yisalus el zoch v'lamayla. Right, through the physical work, through the interactions with the physical world, right, we can achieve this. Va'adarabba, on the contrary, on hashpalaso tihag bahaso, the lower it is, the higher it is. Umisham yikne yakaru chvod she'en kamo biyoso hofech es hachoshech leor v'setzalmaves lenoga yizrach. Right. So now think about it. Well, it's not just that we've turned our guf into something more spiritual, right? But we've been taking all the physical that's around us in the world and turning it into spiritual through our avodas Hashem. Taking every food that we eat that we make a bracha on, and now we use that energy for avodas Hashem. Taking every challah that we bake that we took off challah for, everything. There's nothing that we have, and that's why it makes a lot of sense when you understand the structure this way. Of course, the Torah is going to be on everything. Of course, every single aspect of life is going to have a Torah, perspective, or a Torah requirement, or however you want to put it, because that's the whole point of a Jew being here, is to be going through this world, living physically, right? Going to work, making money, doing what we need to do, in order to be mezakech haguf, in order to elevate all of the stuff around us. And then not only are we elevated, but all the stuff around us is elevated also. Right? By turning the ra into tov, turning the physical into spiritual. And this is like sort of a hint, or I think maybe say this explicitly. This is a gvulos, are los ases, right? What's a gvul? It's like, don't do this. Here's a fence. Don't go there. Don't eat. That's this week's parsha is like all of kashrus, right? There's lots of gvulot about what we can and cannot do, and all of that is exactly this. When I'm in an airport and there's non-kosher food, and then there's a fruit that's over there, right? So that's all aspects of the physical world. The non-kosher food is not any more physical than the apple. It's not any more, ra than the apple is. It's just, I have now drachim. I have the way that Hashem told me to use the world in order to elevate my spirituality, tells me that this apple is what I have to do if I want to, in addition to just, satiating myself, in addition to just, being full and not being hungry, right? But if I want to be working in the spiritual sense, if I want to be mezakech my guf, then I have to keep that gvul. Right, the sedarim, and the sedarim isn't, that's the mitzvahs asay. Those are the rules, right? The ways in which we do things. The adam, betashmish yishtamish me olov briosav ukavana shiskavin bohem asher b'yishtamish mehem adam b'osam agvulos b'osam sedarim b'osam kavana shitziv b'reis b'shmol yeh also apol gufani v'chamri atzmo pal shleimos. Wow, unbelievable, right? So he's saying, now that the Torah is here, now that Hashem gave us these ways, these siddharim, in which I have the ability to turn the choshech into or, in order to overcome the chamrius of the situation. So now, in going about my life, right, in living, in also poel agufani, the chamri atzmo, in that very act of negotiating a sales contract, or whatever my job is, changing a diaper when I'm a ganenet, or whatever it is, in that act of gufani v'chamri, that's a poel shleimus. That's an act of shleimus, because I have the drachim, I have the mitzvah, I have the Torah that told me how to take this situation and do it the right way. If I'm changing a diaper, and a Torah thought comes in my head and I don't say it, or I can't say a bracha now because there's a dirty diaper, or I wash my hands after I change a diaper, all of these things. There's Torah for everything, right? This is not, mamish what we say, and you don't really understand it necessarily this way. But Ratza Kadosh Baruch Hu l'zakos es Yisrael lefichach hirba lehem Torah v'mitzvos. Right? It's for our benefit, right? Every mitzvah that we do is for our benefit. Why would I want to interact with the world in just a physical way when I have the opportunity to interact in a physical way that's also going to be mezakich my guf and elevate my neshama and acquire for me netzach netzachim, right? Why wouldn't I do that, right? So it would be a shame. It would be it would be terrible if there would be things that we were forced to do, if we were forced to interact in the physical world that would not also give us schar, and when I say schar, I mean shleimus and all of that, right? So what a chaval. So that's why we say, right, that it's not that much more of a yoke and that much more of a responsibility and that much more of a of a pain. Maybe sometimes we feel that way also, right? But the point of it is that we have now the opportunity in every single area, in every venue, in every interaction, we have the opportunity to do avodas Hashem, which is exactly this, which is the sdarim, the ways in which we use the world to overcome our physicality. Wow. And through these very acts, through cooking and driving to work, etc., everything, all of these things. And again, we're not talking about a person here having big kafanos and all of that, and that just doing it right, doing the things right, keeping the halachos when I'm cooking, grabbing the milchig fork instead of the fleishig fork. That's exactly what we're talking about over here. That okay. Yeah. Right? And through this, a person has the ability to elevate themselves and pull themselves up from this choshech, and okay. Let me see. Okay, we're going to push to get to hay, and we're going to push to get to okay. Okay, so Hashem, Hishkifa, Hashem, from looking on above, he's talking about in mankind here in general. He's explaining, he's not going further, he's explaining now what I was just saying, that the Torah and mitzvos are these gvulos and starim. He's just going to be explaining this now. So Hashem, Hishkifa, Hashem looked down, from the above over everything, and he saw all the things, all the chisronos that exist in the world, all the aspects of physicality that's mutba in a person and that's mutba in the world, all the inyanim of maila and yakar, that true beauty and kedusha that are possible, right, for a person to cling to Hashem. He saw, right, all of this, with all of that in mind, so to speak, right, with the perspective, with the chachma, however you want to put it, of all everything that Olam Hazeh is lacking, everything that needs to be mushlam, all the ways in which to be mashlim it, right? So Hashem made a seder to make this happen. Right? He made mitzvos and averos. That if a person does it, so then he'll do this. He'll hit all the points, all the growth points, all the milos he'll hit. And he will have kept away from himself anything that would bring him down, right? Anything that would be negative. And were it not for the punishment of death, were it not for the fact that a person has to die, right, we would actually see this happen. Can you imagine? You would actually see it happen. Every time you made a bracha, you would glow a little bit more. Every time you did a chesed, you would you do an avera, we would dim a little bit, right? It would be crazy. But often shayim is dakech hadiada zikuch kamor, right? It could have been that the guf could have actually been cleansed. Umisalim shneihem eladvekus bo yisbarach, and both the guf and the neshama could have gone up together. Lafisha gzer gzura. However, since now we have death in the world. Ein hadavar nasa b'pam achas. It can't happen round one. We need, round two to come back together again. It can't happen now. Al kol panim, however, even though it can't fully happen, it can't be actualized over here. We can't see it happen. However, the neshama is growing with every bracha. It is changing with every good thing we do. We just don't see it here, but it's happening. It's mamash happening, right? Like the picture of Dorian Gray, right? The Havdil. I was talking about Averos, but I like that movie during Elul because the Seres Mechuva makes a person think, if my neshama would be visible, what kind of, what would it look like, right? So that's what he's saying here. The Maisa, it's happening. The fact that we can't see it shining on my face and my hands don't glow when I do a chesed and all of those things, that's because we live in a physical world where the physicality is overwhelming the neshama. But it's happening. It's happening in real time, as they say, right? It's in real time the neshama is growing. Al kopal mischazekes haneshama ba'atzma v'aguf mizdakich b'koach af al pi she'enu nase b'pol. And the guf is getting a zikuch in potential, even though it's not being actualized yet. The kona adam matzav shleimus b'koach sheyetze achar kach l'pol b'zman haroilu. And we are acquiring for ourselves in potential, right? It'll be actualized in the appropriate time. We are acquiring for ourselves the potential of shleimus and perfection, which we're going to get to. Let's just read the first line of Hey, so we don't leave us off, and then we'll stop there. Hasdarim v'agvulos ha'ela hinehem klal hamitzvos ha'asiyin v'halavim. Right. So what we're talking about here this whole time is the mitzvos, the aseis and the los aseis. Asher kol achas mehem mechuvanes el tachlis heknos v'odam v'atzim bo achas memadregos hamayla amitis v'zachanu. Every single mitzvah, every single avera, every single one is perfectly tuned to get a person to be able to allow a person to be able to achieve shleimus al yidei po'al mitzvah aseyahi or aminiya min alos aseh, by either doing the mitzvah or staying away from the avera. Right. So that's a huge idea now. What we were just introduced to. Right. Until now, he introduced us to the whole idea of physical and spiritual, the combination of the two, the effects that the two have on each other, and now he's introduced us for the first time, which is going to get more into this, the concept that in addition to these two things, there's also a seder here. There's also sdarim. There's also the Torah that Hashem gave us that it tells us how to navigate through the world using the physical world, living a physical life, and in so doing, elevating our spirituality and being mizakeh chaguf along the way. Okay, have a great Shabbos, everybody. Good to see you. Good Shabbos, good Shabbos.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Shabbos.
Thank you. Have a good Shabbos.